He was 19 years old. 19. The field in front of him was white, snow-covered, frozen solid, silent. And then at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the silence ended. 6 German tanks rolled out of the village of Holtzwihr, their engines growling low and heavy across the cold Alsatian plain. Behind them came the infantry, 250 soldiers in white winter camouflage, nearly invisible against the snow, moving in formation, rifles up, converging on one thing: his position. His men were outnumbered, his reinforcements hadn't come, his tank destroyers were already burning, and every officer in his company was dead. Every single one, except him. He picked up his radio. He ordered his men to fall back into the woods. Then he stayed, alone, in the open, on a burning machine that could explode at any moment. And for 1 hour, 60 minutes that would change the course of the battle and the rest of American military history, he held the line. This is the story of Second Lieutenant Audie Murphy, the most decorated American combat soldier of the Second World War, and the day he faced down an entire German company by himself and won. If you believe that stories like this one deserve to be remembered and told the right way, hit that subscribe button right now. This channel is dedicated to bringing the real history of America's warriors back to life. To understand what happened on that frozen field in January of 1945, you have to go back much further. You have to go back to a sharecropper's shack in the red clay hills of Hunt County, Texas. Audie Murphy was born on June 20, 1925, the 7th of 12 children. His parents were tenant farmers, bound to land they didn't own, working cotton fields for $1 a day when the work was there. His father, Emmett Murphy, drifted in and out of the family's life before eventually abandoning them altogether. His mother, Josie Bell, was left to hold everything together. She rarely had the resources to do it. Audie dropped out of school after the 5th grade. There was simply no choice. The family needed to eat. He worked the fields, he picked cotton, he took whatever odd jobs came his way. But the thing that would mark him most, the skill that would one day save his life and the lives of dozens of others, was the rifle he carried into the woods of northeastern Texas as a boy. Ammunition was expensive. Every shot had to count. Audie Murphy learned to fire once, accurately, without hesitation, under pressure. He hunted squirrels, rabbits, whatever he could find to put food on the table for his younger brothers and sisters. His sister Nadine would later say, simply and powerfully, he could kill a rabbit on the run. That's how we lived. That's how we ate. He was my hero even then, before he did anything great. In May of 1941, his mother died. She was 50 years old. Audie was 15. With 3 younger siblings sent to an orphanage and a family scattered by poverty, something hardened in the boy from Texas. He had spent his entire childhood being responsible for people who depended on him. That instinct, that unbreakable sense of duty, would follow him across an ocean and into the worst fighting of the Second World War. When Pearl Harbor was attacked on December 7, 1941, Audie Murphy went immediately to enlist. The Marines turned him down. Too short, too light. The Army paratroopers said the same. He was 5 feet 5 inches tall and weighed barely 110 pounds. Finally, with his older sister's help falsifying documents to add a year to his age, he got into the regular Army. His company commander at basic training looked at the baby-faced Texan and tried to transfer him to the cook and baker's school. Murphy refused. He wanted combat. He would get it. The 3rd Infantry Division, known as the Rock of the Marne, was one of the most battle-hardened units in the entire U.S. Army. Murphy joined the division's 15th Infantry Regiment, and in the summer of 1943, waded ashore in Sicily. He was 17 years old by the Army's records. Probably younger in reality. From Sicily, the division fought its way up the Italian peninsula, the brutal, grinding campaign that chewed through Allied troops at places like Anzio and Monte Cassino. Murphy distinguished himself again and again. He was recommended for a battlefield commission. He earned the Distinguished Service Cross, the nation's 2nd highest valor award, along with 2 Silver Stars and 2 Bronze Stars, all before he ever reached France. By the time the war moved to the French countryside, Audie Murphy was already a combat veteran many times over. He had seen close friends die. He had killed men with his own hands. He had been wounded, recovered, and gone back. He had grown up, entirely and irreversibly, not in the cotton fields of Texas, but in the mud and blood of the European theater. By January of 1945, he was a second lieutenant, temporarily promoted, commanding what remained of Company B, 15th Infantry Regiment, a company that had been devastated by weeks of brutal fighting in the Colmar Pocket, a dangerous German-held salient in the Alsace region of northeastern France. The Colmar Pocket was one of the last significant German strongholds on French soil. If it wasn't eliminated, the Nazis could potentially break out, strike Allied supply lines, and threaten the entire advance into Germany. It had to be cleared, and the 3rd Infantry Division was given the job of doing it. The days leading up to January 26th were already catastrophic. On January 23rd, the 30th Infantry Regiment advanced through the Bois de Holtzwihr, a large forest north of the heavily fortified village of Holtzwihr, and was cut to pieces by German tanks and infantry. Caught in the open on frozen ground, unable to dig foxholes, they were savaged and forced to withdraw. The next day, January 24th, Murphy's 15th Infantry Regiment was ordered to retake that same ground. The fighting that followed was so fierce that by the end of the day, Company B had lost all of its officers, killed or wounded, except one. It had lost 102 of its 120 enlisted men. The survivors, with Murphy now in command by default, pushed through the dark and the cold and reached their assigned position at the southern edge of the Bois de Holtzwihr, facing the village of Holtzwihr, directly across open snow-covered fields. They worked through the night trying to dig foxholes. The ground was frozen solid. They couldn't get more than a few inches down. By morning, Murphy had positioned his remaining men along the wood line and received 2 tank destroyers from the 601st Tank Destroyer Battalion as reinforcement. He called battalion headquarters and was told his additional reinforcements, fresh troops from the 2nd Battalion, 30th Regiment, had not arrived yet. His orders were simple: hold your position. He looked out at the fields. He could see Holtzwihr, heavily fortified, crawling with German forces. It was in plain view, less than a mile away. And then, at 2 in the afternoon of January 26, 1945, it began. The German counterattack came out of Holtzwihr like a thunderclap. 6 tanks, some accounts specify Jagdpanthers, among the most powerful armored vehicles the Germans fielded, rolled forward across the frozen fields, preceded by an artillery barrage that crashed into the tree line where Murphy's men were sheltering. Behind the armor came approximately 250 German infantrymen in white winter camouflage, advancing in disciplined formation, using the tanks as cover. Murphy took one look at what was coming and made a decision that was both tactically sound and morally profound. His 40-odd surviving men couldn't stop what was rolling toward them. Not with what they had. Not in that terrain. A stand in the open would mean annihilation. He ordered them back, deep into the woods, to prepared defensive positions where they would at least have cover. Then he sent his telephone linemen back as well, and he stayed. He picked up the radio handset and began calling in artillery. Accurate fire direction requires knowing exactly where the enemy is relative to your own position, which means staying forward, exposed, and calm under fire. He was none of those things naturally. He was terrified. He said as much later, but he stayed. The 2 American tank destroyers that had been positioned on the road were struck almost immediately. German fire found them both. Their crews abandoned the burning vehicles and retreated to the woods, leaving the machines blazing in the snow. One of them, an M10 tank destroyer, sat directly behind Murphy's position, flames pouring from the hull, its ammunition potentially seconds from cooking off in an explosion that could level everything around it. Murphy watched the German infantry advancing. He kept calling in artillery. He emptied his M1 carbine at the approaching soldiers. And then, as the enemy closed within a few hundred yards, he made the decision that would make him immortal. He climbed onto the burning tank destroyer. Think about what that means for a moment. The vehicle was on fire. Its ammunition was still inside. It could explode at any second, and if it did, there would be nothing left of Audie Murphy to bury. He knew that. He climbed up anyway. The tank destroyer's .50 caliber machine gun was still functional. From that elevated, burning platform, Murphy had a clear field of fire across the open snow. He swung the gun toward the German infantry and opened up. Back in the tree line, Private Anthony Abramsky watched through the smoke and the cold. He later said it was the greatest display of courage he had ever witnessed in his life. He expected the tank destroyer to explode under Murphy at any moment. He stood there watching, unable to help, certain he was seeing a man die. Murphy didn't die. He worked the .50 caliber with devastating precision. He knew German infantry tactics from 3 years of fighting them. He knew where they would concentrate, where they would try to maneuver, how they would attempt to flank. He directed his machine gun fire with the calm of a man who had spent his boyhood making every single bullet count. On the radio, a voice from battalion headquarters asked, "How close are the Germans to your position?" Murphy looked down from his burning perch at the infantry advancing below him. He reportedly said, "Just hold the phone and I'll let you talk to one of them." He kept firing. The German infantry wavered. The tanks, losing their infantry screen, began to slow. Without foot soldiers to protect them from close-range anti-tank weapons, the German armor couldn't advance freely. The momentum of the attack, that terrible, overwhelming momentum, began to break. Murphy held that position for 1 full hour. 60 minutes on a burning vehicle, exposed to fire from 3 sides, in sub-zero temperatures, with a leg wound he had sustained in the fight and refused to acknowledge. He killed or wounded approximately 50 German soldiers in that hour. The artillery he was directing killed or wounded dozens more. When the machine gun finally ran out of ammunition, Murphy climbed down from the burning wreck, which miraculously never exploded, and walked back to the tree line to rejoin his men. He was limping. He refused to be evacuated. Instead, he turned to what remained of Company B and led them forward, a counterattack into the very ground the Germans had just been pushed back from. The men who followed him were exhausted, under strength, and had just watched their lieutenant hold off a battalion from a burning tank for an hour. They followed him anyway. The Germans pulled back. The Holtzwihr held. The following day, January 27th, American forces captured Holtzwihr itself. Within 2 days, the areas north of the Colmar Canal were cleared of organized German resistance. The Colmar Pocket, the last major German foothold on French soil, had been broken. Audie Murphy hadn't broken it alone. But on that one frozen afternoon, at that one critical point, one 19-year-old from the cotton fields of Texas had been the difference between holding and collapse. On June 2, 1945, Lieutenant General Alexander Patch, commanding general of the 7th Army, presented Audie Murphy with the Medal of Honor. Murphy was 19 years old. He was the youngest recipient in the room. He was also, by any objective measure, the most decorated American soldier of the entire Second World War. Over his time in uniform, Murphy earned 33 awards and decorations. Among them, the Medal of Honor, the Distinguished Service Cross, 2 Silver Stars, the Legion of Merit, 2 Bronze Stars with the V, Device for Valor, 3 Purple Hearts, the French Légion d'honneur, and the French Croix de Guerre with Palm. He was credited with killing or wounding more than 240 German soldiers across campaigns in North Africa, Sicily, Italy, and France. When his photograph appeared on the cover of Life magazine, the actor James Cagney saw it and reached out. Murphy went to Hollywood. He starred in 44 films, most of them westerns. In 1955, he played himself in the film adaptation of his own memoir, To Hell and Back, a film that became one of Universal Pictures' highest-grossing releases of that era. It remained so for more than 2 decades. But behind the screen and the medals and the magazine covers, something else was happening. Something the country wasn't yet ready to see or understand. Audie Murphy came home from the war a hero. He left something of himself in the fields of Europe that he never got back. He slept with a loaded pistol under his pillow every night. He suffered from nightmares, vivid, violent, relentless. He couldn't close his eyes without the war coming back to him. By the mid-1960s, he had become dependent on a prescription sleeping medication called Placidil. When he realized he was addicted, he locked himself in a hotel room, stopped taking the pills, and endured the withdrawal alone for a week in silence. That was who Audie Murphy was. He fought everything: enemies, addiction, his own mind, the same way he fought the Germans at Holtzwihr, alone, without asking for help, without giving up. But he also did something remarkable. Something that, given the culture of that generation, was almost unheard of. He talked about it. At a time when men who had survived the war were expected to come home, get a job, and never speak of what they had seen, Murphy began openly discussing what was then called battle fatigue. He described the nightmares. He described the inability to sleep, to feel at peace, to stop seeing the faces of the dead. He called on the United States government to take the mental wounds of war as seriously as the physical ones, to fund research, extend healthcare benefits, and stop treating the invisible injuries of combat as personal weakness. It was a revolutionary act for a man of his generation, the most decorated soldier in American history, standing up and saying, "This hurts. It hurt all of us, and we deserve better." 5 months after Audie Murphy died in a plane crash on May 28, 1971, Memorial Day weekend, in fog and rain near Roanoke, Virginia, at the age of 45, Congress passed legislation dedicating a Veterans Administration hospital in San Antonio to his memory. The Audie L. Murphy Memorial VA Hospital stands there still, a monument not just to his valor in combat, but to his courage in speaking the truth about what war does to the men who fight it. He is buried at Arlington National Cemetery. His grave is one of the most visited in the entire cemetery. The headstone is simple, no gold leaf, no elaborate inscription, just his name, his rank, his dates. The humility of the stone matches the man. Every year, people come to stand in front of that headstone. Veterans, families of veterans, historians, children who have just learned his name for the first time. They come because the story of Audie Murphy is not simply a story about what one man did on one afternoon in the snow of France. It is a story about where courage comes from. It doesn't come from strength. Murphy weighed 110 pounds when he enlisted. Every branch of the military turned him away. It doesn't come from wealth or privilege. He grew up in a sharecropper's shack. He left school after the 5th grade. He hunted rabbits so his brothers and sisters could eat. It comes from something harder to name and harder to manufacture. A sense of duty that runs deeper than fear. A refusal to leave the people who depend on you. A decision made in a fraction of a second on top of a burning vehicle with the enemy 100 yards away that you will not move. On January 26, 1945, a German village was holding the line. The tanks were rolling. The infantry was advancing. The position was about to fall. And then one American refused to let it. He was 19 years old. He had nothing left to fire but a borrowed machine gun, and something that cannot be trained into a soldier and cannot be taken from one, the absolute bone-deep refusal to abandon the men behind him. That refusal, that one man's decision to stay, changed the day. And in changing the day, it changed the battle. And in changing the battle, it may well have changed the course of the war. Remember his name. Audie Leon Murphy, June 20th, 1925, May 28th, 1971. The most decorated American combat soldier in the history of the United States Army. He is not forgotten, not here, not ever. If this story moved you, if you believe these men deserve to be remembered, subscribe to this channel right now. Hit the like button, ring that bell so you never miss the next story. These histories belong to all of us. Let's make sure they survive.